Welcome to Terrible Lizards, a podcast about dinosaurs with Dr. David Hone and Izzy Lawrence. In this episode, we talk about paleontology and the problem of getting the money, Lebowski.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to It Is Terrible Lizards. We are on series 11.
11, I think.
Which is 11, which is like another year, another dinosaur.
We'll do a couple of episodes and see if anyone listens and how.
Yeah. We'll see if anybody's going to. Well, I hope they are listening, because we've been doing lots of preparations for the next year. Well, kind of. We've emailed people at Lyme Regis to say, can we come to your festival? And they've gone.
Well, to be fair, they asked us, so it's.
That is true. That is true.
But then we have to grovel. We got asked. Yes.
Fair enough. Anyway, point is, so there will be things coming up this year. Hopefully, you can sort of see us and squidge our faces. Please don't squidge our faces. That sounds wrong. But anyway, yes, Dave. I don't know what we're going to be talking about now. All I know is that you, Dr. David Home from Queen Mary University, are going to tell me about something which really doesn't irritate you at all.
We'll get to the thing which definitely doesn't annoy me and isn't why I want to have a whole episode revolving around it in good time, but in order to do so, it's really important to have quite a lot of background to where the definitely not a rant is coming from. But I think that's also kind of the background stuff is also kind of interesting given how many people we do get asking about becoming a paleontologist or getting a career in paleo or academia in general. And I know a bunch of my fellow academics listen to this, but around the world and yada yada yada, systems are different, etc., etc. So I want to start with REF, R-E-F, which I'd be amazed if many listeners at all have actually heard of. So REF is a typically horrible government acronym which stands for Research Excellence Framework. And this is the attempt, being an important word, of the UK government to basically kind of monitor and judge the effectiveness, I guess, or influence of academia. So not just science, medicine, history, law, all the different arts branches are in there as well. And in theory, I think it's every 5 years, but in practice, they keep getting delayed for various reasons. So I think we had one, I think now 2 years ago, but the next one's now not for another 5 years. So there's going to be a 7-year gap. And basically in this 7-year window, the universities have to submit basically an enormous and complicated document. And there's all kinds of, I was going to say, games that kind of go into judging quite how you write your document and quite how you style yourself and what you do, you know, through grants and fundings and all kinds of other things. And we go away and produce papers or books or reports, and those other things can filter into other areas. So things like, legal decisions, because a lot of that comes through academic research. New inventions and innovations, you can think particularly in terms of medicine for things like treatments or engineers, spin-off companies and new technologies and all this kind of stuff and everything that could come from it. And they want to have a measure of how that's doing. And so effectively also to try and get a feel for, is it value for money or not? And so you can understand that, like, collectively you're given billions and billions. We want to make sure we're getting something out of that. Flip side is, how do you judge, say, research on dinosaur behavior versus a potential treatment for some kind of disease versus this engineer's nanotubule, but it doesn't actually do anything yet. It's just cool and we think it might do something, versus this study of 18th century French nuns or whatever it may be.
French nuns all the way.
Right. But that's obviously incredibly tricky to do already. And so it leads to all kinds of complicated intangibilities. And also, and this is where I'm starting to get a little bit relevant, and honestly, I promise you, audience, this will hopefully make sense by the end of it.
I'm waiting for the stomping.
It will be a while. But there's a whole bunch of different ways. I'm afraid that's it. There's a whole bunch of different ways you can do this, because of course, even if you look at, this guy or this team or this department or this university got an awful lot of papers into Nature and Science or whatever, well, great, but famously, the very top journals also have a very high number of retractions because the most exciting cutting edge stuff is very often the most wrong, etc., etc. But again, you really can't compare something like paleontological taxonomy with cancer care. I'm not stupid. I'm going to put cancer healthcare above that, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't carry out the other stuff.
Traitor, Dave.
Yeah, I know.
Traitor.
And then how do you compare them and how do you evaluate them? And they do this in several ways, and I sort of hinted at that before. So straight up looking at papers and or books for the art to tend to produce things like books, and basically getting a bunch of experts to read them and judge them and evaluate them. So that's one way. But the other big one, which has become really important in recent years, is a thing called impact. And they judge impact in several quite markedly different ways, though entertainingly, and this will also become relevant, they haven't yet told us quite what rules we're going to be running to on the next rep, which is kind of relevant when I get round to my side of things. But one of them is law, so like legal decisions or new laws that have come in that have been directly influenced by your work. And this is a key thing. You have to show the connection. It's no good saying, we did a whole bunch of turtle conservation, for example, at my uni, we did a whole bunch of turtle conservation. And then the area in which we did the turtle conservation has now changed their laws to try and protect the turtles better. You need to be able to demonstrate, well, this law was changed because of our research, not just it happened coincidentally. You've actually got to show that they were directly tied together. And in some cases, that's quite easy. So I'm flagging this up literally because a colleague of mine was telling me about this, where they've gone, in the equivalent legal white paper, this is in Cape Verde, that basically says, we here is our proposal for a new law to protect turtles, and it's eventually ratified. It basically cited a bunch of papers going, following this research, we think that we need to change this law on how we look after our turtles. It's like, okay, that's nailed on cast iron. They could also potentially have maybe got like a letter from the minister or something like this that says, because we've been in dialogue, whatever. So that's one. There's a legal one. There's basically a health one, which I don't really know much about, but if you can demonstrate efficacy of outcomes for drug design or patient care or whatever it is, that's a nice one. There is two different kind of money ones. So there's one of straight up, I think, like almost like raw finance, as in, we developed this new technology and then we sold it for £2 billion to the Americans. That's brought £2 billion into the British economy. All right, that's quite useful. That seems like a useful thing. But also there's one on patents. So issued patents is something that can count as impact. And then the final one, which is obviously where we're heading, is basically, in my field, I say public understanding of science. There's like an engagement and communication one. So in other words, taking the research that has been done and taking it back to the public. Wonderful. This is up my alley. Obviously, this is stuff I've been doing for absolutely years. It's something I'm very keen and very interested in. But I have had a very long-term conversation with a bunch of my colleagues at my university, so Queen Mary University of London in the UK. So obviously falling under F, and about how I could create an impact case study. This is what you need. Is like you don't just write, 4 lines of, we made this thing and it made a bunch of money. You've actually got to bring together a case with your evidence. And I want to do one on my dinosaur stuff. And as you can imagine, and as everyone knows, and, be slightly pretentious, but, I've got my blog, I've got my podcast, I've done some TV stuff, I've got all my books. There's loads and loads of stuff I've done like this. Demonstrating that I've done something is actually then surprisingly hard. My understanding from my colleagues, I don't know how true this is, but I very strongly suspect it's true, is that Brian Cox ruined it for everyone 2 recitals ago, because apparently Manchester, where he's based, put in a thing basically going, well, Brian Cox is a physicist at our university. He's had a couple of award-winning BBC TV series in the last couple of years, watched by millions and millions of people. So how's that for science outreach and education?
Are you about to beg our listeners to just share this with like 28 of their friends?
No, because where this apparently queered the pitch for everyone else is they went, okay, we'll let you have that this time, but next time we want to see the evidence. Because just because loads of people watched it doesn't necessarily mean they actually learned anything from it. How many people have watched a film and then can't remember the plot the next day? Or watched a documentary and then, Attenborough was talking about, that animal. I can't remember what it was called now. And it was hunting this other animal. And I can't remember what that was called now, but it was really good. Right. And that's also kind of a fair point in that you want to demonstrate this connection. It's not just that you put the stuff out there. Again, I've sold lots of books. How many people have read those books? And then how many of those people have definitely learned something as a result of reading those books is suddenly an awful lot harder to work out and try and do anything with. But those are the requirements, or at least as far as we can tell, those are the requirements last time, or will probably be the requirements next time around. And then that's the really tricky bit, because of course, for someone like me doing this, everything is in hindsight. It can take me a year to get my book sales figures. I'm sure you've had something similar,
Oh, yes.
Right, exactly. My new dinosaur behavior book, actually someone sent me an email just before Christmas going, I've been trying to order some copies for my class and I can't get any delivered and I don't know why. So I emailed the publisher and they went, oh, well, we've gone through the first print run. It's selling really well. And I went, great, how many copies have you sold? And they said, a few thousand. And I'm like, oh no, they said a few thousand units have been sold. And I'm like, right, but this is also ebook and audiobook and then the actual book. And so is that, so they did international units. And I went, right, but you're in America. So does that mean you've sold more in America and these are just the ones sold outside of America? Or is that everything? And of course, when I asked for clarification, I didn't hear. And it's normal not to hear for a year. So you're permanently running a year behind. But again, if the next ref cycle is going to be 28, 29, I think is the current deadline, so 3.5, 4 years away. 4 years from now, I might be asked to write a document to say, I published this dinosaur behavior book and look how influential it's been on the public's understanding of dinosaur behavior. So I now need to try and get hold of people who bought my book 4 years ago. And I don't know who they are because, of course, it's sold in bookshops and sold on Amazon and sold in museum gift shops. Those people might have read my book and gone, this is brilliant. It's changed my life. I'm really into dinosaurs now. And I'll never hear from them again. And this is really the position that we're in for this side of things. Because what we think they want, and again, I use the word think because it's not entirely clear, even looking at what other universities have submitted, and again, don't have the details of the rules yet, is one of the key things they've asked to look for is a change in behavior. In other words, something like, I read your book and therefore I really got into dinosaurs and now I bought other books, or I went to a museum, or I've started getting involved in science in a way that I wasn't before, or, that sort of thing. And again, that's wonderful, but how on earth do you grab those people in the first case? Again,
well, we need a qualitative data analysis.
Right. So this is part of the problem. We know we have our listeners.
Totally cheat this, Dave, right? Because this is how a geographer would do this. So there's one way, which is to do what you're thinking of, which is get every single person who's bought the book, have an analysis of how many units have sold in which locations for things, and just hurt yourself with maths. The other one is to get a random group of people, give them the book, make them read it, and then ask what they thought and ask how their behaviour's changed. And if you actually use the right qualitative questions to really steer them, you can basically make sure that they've definitely changed their lives. They left their wives. They decided to, kill their cat. And they're just, going
the fossilization
exactly.
Process, yeah.
You can do whatever you like. I love qualitative data collection. It's brilliant. But yes, that would be my, as a geographer's, academic geographer's advice is
right. Well,
make your own argument, find the data.
I'll bear that in mind. So all of that is a slight prelude to say, in about 3 years, I'm probably going to be hassling an awful lot of our listeners in every single episode to fill in some kind of survey that I'm running. Though in the short term, I'm supposed to be doing one in January. Which will be before this episode comes out. So of course, that's That's
Okay.
kind of it. That's
Well,
not
if you want to do a little survey, we
directly
can
them.
put it on the Patreon. We can put it on the Patreon and just say, have we changed your life?
we can, and we can hope. But at least part of what can go into that is demonstrating reach. So despite this kind of Brian Cox effect of, well, millions of people watch my TV show, so obviously you were successful, there is understandably at least still a component of probably someone who's done a TV series that millions of people have watched has been more successful than someone who launched a podcast and made 4 episodes and they only got 50 listeners each.
Hey, don't give away our numbers, Dave.
Yeah. Yeah, so there is that. Right, so that is still a component of it. And then this comes now into the central core of where I'm going when we said we were setting a thing up. So because I've got
waiting for the dinosaurs.
Yeah, so well, it's more a science and a science communication thing. But because I've got this potential basically dry run coming up in January where we're going to look at what do we think we're going to do 3 years from now? You know, how are we building up? What shape are we in? What papers have we got that look good? What case studies have we got that look good? Is there anything that's already in the bag and we can just leave to one side and focus on other areas, etc.? I've been hunting around for evidence of my impact and where I might have been influencing people and seeing what things might have been based on. I do not know why you're giggling. I know people can't watch this video.
It's just that thing of going, never Google yourself, Dave.
Oh,
Don't
right,
do
okay.
it. Don't
Fine.
ever.
Fine. And then what I rapidly ran into, because what I was looking for is like, right, I've got to demonstrate this connection between my active research and the outreach or event that happened. And of course, with something like a book, that's relatively easy because it's like there's a reference list at the back. It's got some of my own references in it. That's fine. But I was like, right, what are some of the stuff that I've done in the last couple of years, which has likely to have got some real serious interest, both from the media directly, but also into the general public? Well, my Spinosaur stuff. Everyone's heard and been bored to tears when we talk about my Spinosaurs and all the arguments
Stop bored to tears, Dave. It's brilliant.
It's
random evil heron thing.
Yeah, how aquatic or semi-aquatic they may have been. What were they feeding on? What were they doing? Where were they living? And of course, the big kind of back and forth with one team over this, but also I've done that other supplementary stuff. So you might remember the Isle of Wight species. I've just had the new paper out on teeth and so yeah. So I was looking
heron.
Yes, exactly. So I was looking for this stuff. So it's like, okay, we both know there's an awful lot of YouTubers and people like that out there doing psychons of various different forms, all the way up from kids who are often quite young kids who are just into dinosaurs, all the way up into like professional, like adult academics and psychommers, and even people working in museums and other universities and stuff like this, putting this stuff together. And what I rapidly found was, and you can see just from like thumbnails or just like, doing just hitting on the scroll bar and just whizzing through a whole 2-hour video and seeing what images go past. Clearly, a very large amount of material had made it online that was directly linked to my research. And I can tell that because I'm watching my own graphics go past, my own figures from my paper, and occasionally my name would appear on screen.
But they're not citing their sources.
Bingo. At best, somewhere it said a new paper by Dave Hone and Tom Holt, spoken out loud. And then it might say, picture from Hone and Holt 2017. There was nothing put on screen, and in particular, nothing put in the footnotes or anywhere like that. So when I am trying to say, this guy talked for 2.5 hours about my paper and didn't mention the paper at any point, I would have to watch that video in order to demonstrate that. And then at the end of it, it's okay, I can say, if it is, it is. But like, I cannot watch every YouTube video for the last 5 years that mentions Spinosaurus. At some point, they mention my name and talk about something that might be my paper. And that's a problem. And it's a problem for 2 different ways. The obvious one is exactly this sort of thing, ref. Because although it may sound like a fairly minor thing in the grand scheme of things, this is actually hyper important. And that's where I wanted to go with all of this thing, that there is more. Don't worry, there's more rant and more mo's to come. But ultimately, this is what the government is doing. The government is saying, we gave you all this money, you did all this research, we want evidence that it has gone out and done some public good. And I can't do that because despite the fact that I have done the public good with my outreach, or just the research itself, because people have been using my research to make 2-hour YouTube videos, and there's dozens of these damn things, no one said it. And that is directly feeding back on you because you are getting that source and using it for your content and your creativity and your sharing of information. And that's great. And there's nothing wrong with that. The opposite of that, we want more of that. I am into this. I am not anti-science communication. But if I can't prove that my work has been important and influential, I'm not going to be allowed to do that work. So you are biting the hand that feeds you, almost completely unknowingly. But that is my push in my job is, look at me, I'm a science communicator. I do this research, but I use it to spread the knowledge. And I can't do that because people aren't crediting me. So that in itself...
Oh, Dave, just get more creative. So one thing we can do, we can do Google Analytics and the numbers of, mentions of certain things before and after your paper. And that's reasonable evidence. That's, a social scientist will go, well, actually, that does prove there's a correlation here. And all you need is 1 or 2 videos to show that, you get a mention. Surely that's enough.
So that is something we're going to look at. But of course, the other thing is, if we are talking about science and all the rest of it, is straight up actual credit, academic credit. We've talked, I don't think we've ever been very explicit about it, but like references and referencing, sorry. When you write a scientific paper, exactly that, there are this many T-Rex specimens known, and the biggest of them is this big. You can't just have a sentence like that in a scientific paper. You need your sources, which means either going, there are this many specimens of T-Rex found, these are all the ones that I know about, and here's my list, and therefore that's my count with all my museum numbers. Or, far more likely, there are this many T-Rex specimens known, brackets, someone's name and a date, because someone has already totaled them up, and that is my source. And if you don't believe me, you can go and check that source. And if there's a problem with that, you can check with them. And that's the second side of this, is giving credit for your sources. Because if you have made that video and you're discussing these arguments and what it means and using those figures, even if the paper is open access, because the whole point of open access paper is to make it accessible to people. That's a good thing. But just saying somewhere often I've literally seen videos that go, a new paper has just come out and it says, no mention of who the authors are, no mention of the actual paper, no way of people finding it. Not because they necessarily want to fact check you, but maybe they're interested. And then there's obviously tiers and tiers of this.
My favourite is you go on a TikTok thing, and they talk about a new paper because they're referencing it, and actually cite the paper they're talking about, and it's not about the thing they're talking about. Yeah,
well, that's a different but related problem. But I've had a new paper, and then sometimes there's a new paper, there's a link in the description, and then it's called some kind of tiny URL. So it's not the formal link to the journal, or it's not the DOI, or even if it is the proper DOI, which is like an online library reference catalog system for like everything, it's just that. So, of course, it's a real pain to search for DOIs. It's actually much easier to search for your name or the title of the paper. And so often none of that appears. And this, I think, is getting to a point of almost like epidemic proportion. So what actually started this thought process, actually, this is something I really need to talk about. And I've actually planning on writing something for this online that will come out about the same time as this and actually start prodding the beast on social media and genuinely try and get a little bit of groundswell movement towards this, was Scyphosaura. So my really, really cool pterosaur paper that came out in, was it November? Something like that?
I think so.
2 or 3 months ago. Or maybe it was October. Anyway, came out a few months ago. And within a couple of hours of the paper going out and going live, And of course, there was some press release and some social media from me and people who contribute to the paper and the artists.
And this podcast, Dave.
And this podcast. Well, no, that came out a couple of days. I'm talking about like hours. There were, on the plus side, people doing drawings and sketches and discussing the implications of this work and what it means and this, that, and the other. And no one, like almost no one, mentioned the paper anywhere. And in particular, I was seeing, I don't have a go at paleo artists. I know how important paleo artists are. I know loads of people are amateur artists and all the rest of it. But when I saw, and I'm not kidding, like not like dozens, but like multiple, like more than two, multiple images coming up within minutes, in some cases, of the paper launching, going, oh, this really new cool pterosaur is out, Spinosaurus, here's my drawing of it. And it's like, lovely, you've done a drawing of it. Where did you get the information about that animal that you've done that drawing? Like,
from the new paper, Dave.
Well, right, but that's literally
from the article and the newspaper when they said there was a new paper.
Literally, like multiple ones going, here's my drawing of Spinosaurus, and it's like, okay, this thing has been out, as I said, in one case about like 20 minutes. Okay, the only sources that exist on the planet right now is my paper with the drawings and measurements and description and all the rest of it, and some, including skeletons that Sky McDavid did for us, but they're in the paper. And then Gabriel Ugerto's artwork of it, and then Sky McDavid's skeleton repeated in some of the press material. But of course, those are directly tied to the paper and have ultimately come from us. So this isn't like T-Rex, where there's 100 papers, there are 1,000 papers out there, there's hundreds of other drawings, there's hundreds of photos of skeletons, and all these different mounts, and all these different interpretations over the decades. There's half a dozen versions of this image online, and they're all come from us. In our team.
Exactly. I think you're creating a problem where there isn't one, Dave, because that is very easy to prove, and it's therefore you.
Right, but this...
Whereas your papers on T-Rex are not easy to prove.
But this is the second half of that problem, which is, if everyone who is interested and engaged in this sort of level of academia is trying to be... I'm not saying these people are like wannabe academics, but like we're all part of the same team. We're all team pro. I was going to say pro dinosaur. About pterosaur, but pro science, pro academia, pro paleontology. I honestly don't think you should be going, cool, that new paper's out. Look at all this information. I'm going to do it to generate my art and give absolutely no credit to your sources. Or as I say, in this case, source, because there is only one source and I know who it is.
It's Dave Home.
Well, it is, and this, to be clear, I know you're being sarcastic, but again, this is why I wanted to start off with all the rep stuff, because this isn't about I did a thing and I want credit for my thing because I want people to go, yay, Dave. It's because it's like the right thing to do. You got data from me and you're using it for something, and it's only fair that you credit it. But also, again, it is literally, however completely unwittingly and unknowingly, it is biting the hand that feeds you. Because if the people like me can't easily demonstrate that this work has come from them, that makes our lives doing something like Ref that much harder. And if it makes my life harder, I am wasting my time trying to hunt down little bits of data that might build my case study. And if I can't make a good enough one, ultimately the university might shut me down. And you don't want that. And all you have to do is cite the paper somewhere. But that's it. And you should do it anyway. So,
I mean, you're speaking the plight of a million photographers and portrait photographers.
Well, yeah, and I know, I know through you, I've got to meet and interact with a bunch of comedians and become friends with a couple of them and follow some of them, and I know like joke theft, and we've talked about plagiarism before, I'm sure, but these are real things, and cartoons that get shared, because we had Andy, his surname's dropped out my head, Bunny Suicides artist.
Oh, Riley,
seen that stuff shared all over the internet, completely without credit. I'm a big fan of XKCD and Sarah Anderson. You see that stuff shared everywhere without credit. That is absolutely a thing, and that's eating into people's livelihoods just as much. I think not different, I guess, where it's not even necessarily a more direct impact here, but I guess it's a little bit more almost kind of...
It's not about your ego here. It's not about you being able to sell dinosaur stuff. It's the fact that you're allowed to actually do the research in the first place, which everybody likes. Yeah. So it's directly stopping it. Andy could still do, even if he couldn't sell any because everybody was getting them for free, he could still create suicide bunny photo images.
Yeah.
But you couldn't.
Yeah, I mean that's not quite where I was going with it. I was thinking more along the lines of, I think perhaps one potential difference there as well is, you might get like kind of comedy Uber fans, but I think a huge amount of that kind of like random sharing is, oh, that funny thing's come off on Facebook, I click like, and that's still bad because it's unattributed plagiarism. It's unattributed. It's a form of plagiarism. It's not giving fair credit. It won't necessarily, even if people see it, won't necessarily lead them back to the original artist, who then might make a sale or sell a book or get a commission or something. But in this case, these are the fans. You are someone who's so into dinosaurs and pterosaurs and paleontology that within minutes of something coming out, you're desperate to draw it and desperate to be engaged and part of the process and make a video and share that knowledge and information and get other people keen. And great, good. Again, we want more people like that. But yeah, you're actively hindering the thing I think you're a fan of and want to try and help.
I get you, but I understand. You can understand why, can't you? They don't even see your name, Dave. They just see the Schiphosauria. Oh, yeah. They see the flappy flap and go nuts.
And I get that, and indeed, I understand that, because we have to teach our students coming in about plagiarism and attribution and all the rest of it. And I understand, particularly for doing something like Twitter, though of course Twitter's dying, brackets, I've already moved to Blue Sky. But like, if you're on something like that, there is a limited word count, yada, yada, yada. If you don't want to do a whole sequence of posts, getting it all in, particularly if you want to include something like the full DOI or something like the full reference, is very, very difficult. I totally get that. And I also get that probably a huge number, probably even overwhelming majority of the kinds of people that I'm talking about don't know and don't realize, don't understand any of this. I totally get that. And innocence is a great excuse. I think it is. But here's me telling you why. And I am sure a lot of the people listening to this, at least I certainly hope a lot of the people listening to this, going, oh yeah, I've done that. And I had no idea it was an issue. And again, that's why I wanted to give all that background, because I'd be lying if I say one little bit of ego in there, because when you've poured months and months and months of work into something and you've done a good job because everyone's sharing it around, it'd be nice if you got some of the credit for it. But again, it is also, yeah, it's that twofold thing. It's a pragmatic thing. I need it. I literally need it. And again, it's not just me. I'm speaking for all kinds of academics of all different stripes who are doing this sort of stuff. But also, it is the right thing to do. So, hence me kind of taking a mini stand and having a rant and say, if you don't do this, and you think I've talked about you, no need to apologize, but please do that from now on. And if you see other people doing it, point out to them why it's an issue, because I cannot control the internet for everyone who's talking and writing.
Why not, Dave?
And making 2-hour Spinosaurus videos. I just can't. But it is.
I think it's one of those things as well, though. As somebody who posts a lot of weird science content occasionally, and often history content, it is that sort of thing. Going, well, actually, I've read all of these background articles to make this point, but it seems really inappropriate to sort of go, well, I'm really well read and roundly educated. So, I just want to point out that I know what I'm talking about, because it actually almost undermines the point you're trying to make, and people think you're up yourself. That is partly it as well, I think.
I think for bigger discussions, I think that's a different kind of thing, because, if someone just asked me, Dave, what's the biggest tyrannosaur you know of, or how many specimens are there? I'm just going to go, I think it's about this, and it's probably about right. And I'm not going to cite the source because I'm just saying a thing. But
the
again,
source, my memory.
Well, right, but also again, that's much more, as you say, being rounded and making a rounded point about a collective thing is, I think, very different to, as I say, when there was literally like a 2-hour video on Spinosaurus, is it or is it not semi-aquatic, and how much time is it spending in water, that basically went through my paper with Tom Holtz, point by point by point by point, without mentioning us, or like just in the caption somewhere. And of course he did mention us, like, there's a new paper by Dave Hone and Tom Holtz, and these are what they said. Well, okay, great. But like I said, I have to put in Spinosaurus into YouTube and scroll through the thousands of videos to try and find something that might look like it's something documentary-ish put together by someone, and then actively watch it to try and find out. And I don't think that's good enough, at least in part, because it's so incredibly simple. In your, what do they call it? Like the block of text that you can put under like the headline, often it's a click.
Yeah, it's just the description,
right?
The video description.
That video description could be pages long. So put in the full reference, put in to the paper, put in the DOI, because if you know that material well enough to have read the paper and discussed the individual points on individual anatomy, you should know well enough that you should put that full reference in there, and you know what a proper reference and citation is.
I'm going to blow your little brain. So basically, you can also, lots of these YouTube videos have transcripts. You can actually download the transcript and search for your name. That'll save you some time, even though that's still a lot of work. It's annoying. I get it. But also, I reckon we need to speak to some AI modelling people. This is an AI's job. An AI can watch all the videos on the internet and find...
Right. I'm sure that won't at all contribute to the California wildfires that are going to up another couple of lakes. So I want to know whether or not people would use my work.
This is admittedly, I haven't done any climate science for 20 years, nearly. But even I know that what we're seeing now might be slightly exaggerated by climate change, but it's not. It's La Nina. It is the fact that, which is exaggerated by climate change, but it is a normal occurrence, and it's an invasive species of mustard grass that's been growing there, and it's lack of management of wildlife, and you're just like, that's not really climate, okay, but you're just letting everybody go, oh no, it's global warming and climate change. It's like, kind of. It's complicated.
Well, right, but again, in the face of it definitely not helping, and in the face of dozens of people desperate to say that it definitely isn't climate change because that's not real and isn't a thing, at the same time as there's record snows in Texas, it does kind of sound like there's right. We're getting off. But again, the point being, like you said, I can look to Google Analytics and this, that, and the other. I can do all this stuff, but AI shouldn't really have to, because there are easier ways of doing it, and those easier ways of doing it...
Are we blaming the wrong people here, Dave? We should blame the government? Because what the government should do is employ an academic to go, oh yeah, this is really good research, and I can see how loads of people are talking about this, without you having to do it.
Right, well, this is the thing, because again, that's one side of the application, because then without demonstrating the actual engagement... Yeah, Dave's paper got into National Geographic and got into the New York Times and got into the Guardian and whatever else, and featured on the 6 o'clock news even. Brilliant. And built his book around it, brackets, new Spinosaurus book coming out. That's all really, really good and effective. But again, that's part one. I definitely reached a load of people, because I can't have sold 20,000 books. People read National Geographic. This YouTube video has 100,000 watches. Like that is a great start. But the second side still needs to be built. But if you're wasting so much of your time building side A, you've got less time to build side B. And it also, again, it feeds into that thing of, how do I target this audience? Because if I could know that these are the key videos, these 3 YouTubers have done the 3 videos that had the most views on this subject, well, then it's reasonable for me to approach them and go, hey, you've got all this stuff from covering my work. can you send out this link and ask people to fill in this survey or get in touch or all the rest of it?
You don't want to do that. You just want them to sort of say, I did it. Here's a survey I did.
Yeah.
To say.
Yeah. But again, even if none of that happened, it's still the right thing to do. If you are, and if some of these people, I will definitely say, I'm not trying to name names and like call people out, but having had a look online, there are some pretty big paleo YouTubers with very, very sizable followings who are basically making their career off discussing cutting edge science, who barely mention the paper. And as far as I can tell, don't ever, because I've been looking around now, like, here's the reference if you want to read it, or of course, if you're the author, to prove that you were a major part of that. And the interesting thing is, because I think art has got such a big catch now, and there was ironically a pretty big, I was going to say rebellion, that's not the right word. There was definitely something of a movement a couple of years ago among paleo artists, and not just the professionals, again, that huge amateur thing that exists, about crediting people and like, hang on, you've done this video and you've got all my figures in there and like you didn't credit me or anything. And so ironically, I'm now looking at some of these YouTube videos where, again, like, here's an hour video talking about this thing, and in the description there's here are the following people's art that I've, even at this point, I'd say still probably basically ripped off, but at least you've actually attributed them. And the better ones are going, Megalosaurus drawing from 2022 by such and such, link to their website for all their images. But then again, the actual video is discussing a paper of someone and the paper never gets mentioned. And so they've sort of learned that you're supposed to do that. And I'm not pretending the art isn't important, again, when they're basing their videos around it. But like, come on, the video's still discussing this bit of research, and you fail to credit the authors and that research publication. And so that, yeah, that's there too. You're not just supposed to cite Gabriel Goethe or Bob Nichols or Natalia Jagielska and say, look, I nicked this artwork off their website. You're also supposed to say where you got your information.
I mean, I'm just thinking of all the live videos that we've done where we've gone, hey, we need a picture of an dinosaur really quick so that people know what we're talking about, and then we've just gone to Google's image search. So we're guilty of this, Dave.
No,
Okay, it's my fault. It's my fault.
Right, but
it's your podcast when it gets lots of listeners, and it's my podcast when we fail to do due diligence and mention who does all the art. Fair enough.
We're both in long-term relationships, so we both know this is exactly how it works.
Yes, this is true. This is true.
But again, there is a difference between strolling past something in passing and this thing is on the screen for 5 minutes while you talk about it. You're trying to jazz it up. But again, this gets into bigger questions about things like fair use and educational value and what attribution is necessary. I mean, a lot of the stuff we use certainly has people's names already on it, or it's Wikipedia, so it is open source. But also again, as you say, I think there is perhaps not legally, but I think there's definitely a moral difference of, while I'm saying something, you're desperately trying to find something in the background to show people before I move on to the next subject. And I have 100,000 followers, or even 1 million followers on YouTube, and I spent the last 6 weeks making this video and I haven't credited the artist.
I see your issue, but the main issue I have is the fact that the government doesn't trust the institutions that are in place to fund the research that needs funding, and they can't just go, oh, we trust you, here's some, and maybe if you wanted to set up a new university you'd have to do all of this stuff, but to continue having to beg for scraps seems a bit unfair, and a waste of everybody's time.
There are many arguments about REF, and REF isn't the only one. We also have TEF, the Teaching Excellence Framework, that's supposed to evaluate our teaching. And I had to double check and look it up online, and someone answered this on Blue Sky. It's Goodhart's law, which is any metric which becomes a target ceases to become a metric. In other words, universities just been doing outreach and writing books and doing school talks and stuff forever and trying to make money by making patents and selling stuff. And doctors are trying to create cures for diseases and improve patient health. We always did that. But as soon as you say, well, are you doing more than this other university? Because if you are doing more than this other university, we might give you more money. Well, of course, what's everyone doing? They're all trying to now skew their metrics so that they move up the table, and they're now more interested in getting the right number than they are doing the thing they were already doing. And of course, this is inherent, because how the hell else, again, as I say, how else do you compare 18th century French nun to Spinosaurus ecology to carbon nanotubules? You don't. And so this is an understandably almost futile task. And this is probably, I'm not saying ref is bad. I don't think it is bad. It's problematic, but only as problematic as that sort of thing is ever going to be because of what you're trying to achieve. Though there, of course, there is, I would agree, a bigger question of, is it even worth it? Because again, it's not like universities weren't doing this stuff before you set up ref. They were already doing it.
I suggest you just submit a picture, which you can draw yourself. You don't need to, just a picture of a Spinosaur versus an 18th century nun.
Yeah.
And I think
which is better.
You're going to get the money. That's what I think. Nothing against 18th. In fact, I know quite a lot about 18th century nuns. It's very interesting, particularly the French ones. Anyway, yeah, there's a lot of 18th century nuns that got eaten in the south of France in the 18th century by wolves.
Oh, lovely.
There's Beast of Joverdin.
Yes, I'm going to say Brotherhood of the Wolf, a film based on it. Yeah.
Yeah, there was.
Yeah.
It's a true story, though. I think 300 people got killed, all by one wolf, apparently. It was probably a super pack of wolves that was living in the mountains, but they said it was a sort of hybrid that some...
I was supposed to be giant and scaly and yeah. No.
Yeah. They caught it and they actually dissected it, but it rotted before anybody could, do drawings and stuff, which is a shame.
I'm looking over I've got a book somewhere. When I was about 10, my family went and stayed with my uncle, and he had Reader's Digest Book of Strange Tales. And this wasn't like the for those who know the PG tips cards of Arthur C. Clarke's Unexplained Mysteries, where frankly, if you look at them, they're totally explained or just straight up hoaxes. This was one of those rare bits for readers.
It was a real book of real.
Something quite good, like the history of, and of course, as a 10 or 11-year-old, and it's there was a chapter on vampires and werewolves and fairies and famous detectives and superheroes and whatever. And the werewolf and associated folklore had Beast of Joverdin. And so that's something I've known about for a long, long time. And when my uncle died, his son, my cousin, gave me that book because he knew that when I went to his house, I just sat and read it. And so I'm sure it's on my shelf. But having moved house relatively recently, I should have seen it, and I haven't seen it. So where is it?
It was said, dear listeners, that the beast was actually finally killed with melted down silver. So a melted silver bullet killed it, which is where we get the idea that you can kill werewolves.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's a nice little.
There you go. That's where we get that from.
Awesome.
They melted down the crucifix.
I was going to say it's going to be from a church. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, it was very cool story, but also a really lovely study of wolves as well.
Mm.
And it completely ridiculed the French government, and the British government laughed at the king because of it. So he sent down an army who all dressed up as nuns and women in order to lure the wolf out of the thing. Yeah. It's also a lovely sort of little thing about why Americans pride themselves on guns, because none of the local peasants who were getting eaten were allowed to defend themselves with weapons because they weren't allowed any weapons, which is partly why when people go to the Americas, they're so gun crazy, is because it's freedom, quite literally, from wolf attack. This has got nothing to do
anyway,
dinosaurs, Dave.
Yes,
I'm disappointed.
I fear we've drifted into werewolf lore from correct attributions of YouTube videos. That's quite an achievement.
We do need to do an episode on dragons and the difference between worms and all the different withens and the rest of them, because it matters. Yes. And we've just done werewolves, so there's no getting away from it. But ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we'll be back next month with some actual paleontology and dinosaurs, and not Dave whinging on about how he can't get paid to do his dinosaur research unless you guys have if you have had a spiritual awakening listening to this, do let Dave know, because he needs to justify his existence to the government.
And if you think I'm a fat-headed egotist, please don't let me know. I have enough people doing that already.
That's why we love you, Dave. That is. But yes, and another news, if we're allowed to do news, is I've got a book coming out just after this is released. I think 2 days after this is released. My book, The Cursed Tomb, is out, which is a very well studied, with a lot of sources which I didn't cite in my book, but I did discuss it with 2 Egyptologists. So Kelly and Chris helped me greatly with this, and so it's the most historically accurate Egypt, set in 1249 BCE. Starring He-Nut that you can ever get. But if you want to go into tombs, there's a correct number of all the tombs you go in, the pyramids and stuff. The step numbers are correct, and the stuff you see in the walls is exactly as it is. Because I'm a nerd.
While we're doing that, you mentioned it before, but yeah, this year, June 14th and 15th, I'm pretty sure.
Yes.
So Lyme Regis Fossil Festival, we will both be there. The intention is there's going to be a live podcast recording. So just in case any listeners were in the area or are planning on going down for that anyway, heads up, we will actually be we should. We've been invited.
We've said
yes. But yes, we should be there.
We haven't actually booked anything, but we will.
No.
It'll be fine.
Yeah, so I think we're supposed to be the afternoon or evening of the Saturday, which is the 14th.
Yeah.
But we will be around Saturday afternoon, Sunday morning.
Hopefully my book Inventors and Dinosaurs will be out by then for the time sheet next door, so I might be doing a little book talk.
We will be bringing books. We might also be doing some other talks or show and tell or something. It's TBC, but we're definitely doing a recording.
Yeah.
So
yes. Well, we're not definitely, because we haven't actually booked it.
Well,
but,
yes. That's definitely the plan.
The plan is that we're there, and the plan is we see you. The plan also is that we thank you very much for listening to this episode of Terrible Lizards. It's Series 11. We started off weird. Okay. It got a bit, academic and nerdy, but, it matters. If you care about dinosaurs, you care about the research. And please do attribute Dave when you're talking about stuff on the internet.
And other people. And other people too.
Oh, yeah. But
whoever is relevant.
Not if they're from rival universities, though, because they'll get the funding.
Well, yeah, ideally no one I don't like, so yeah.
Exactly, there we go. So only reference Dave and his friends. And yes, we will see you next month. If you want to, please go to our Patreon. There will be extras for you there. I think we need to, instead of squawking like a pterosaur or roaring like a dinosaur, can we please make the noise of an exasperated academic?
I thought we were going to do, can we type attributions?
Very nice. That go, oh dear, like an academic would be great. After 3, 1, 2, 3.
Oh dear.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Terrible Lizards, and thanks as well for going to that social media you never seem to update and sharing the podcast there too. You could also go to patreon.com/Terrible Lizards to support the show and access a wealth of extra content. Get in touch with us via terriblelizardspod@gmail.com, and while you're here, do check out Dave and Izzy's books. Flappy bye-bye.